So, We Are Austin TV has been involved pretty heavily in Austin media for the last couple of years, which includes Media Cup performances. You have two straight MVPs from your crew, and you had what, five people playing in this year's game?
We had five people this year.
Okay, so first of all, I mean that's a pretty big crew to roll with, kind of a lot more than a lot of other media outlets in town, and everybody seems to be really good at playing soccer. So I'm wondering, do you have kind of soccer agility tests when you're recruiting new members? I'm not sure like who all these people are. Like the MVP, I haven't seen him before, but there he was, like playing really well in the field,
Well,
and all that.
one of the main requirements is hey, can you play soccer? First of all,
Yeah.
can you play? Yes or no? Because we might need you in November. So so that's definitely one thing that we totally look out for. But the MVP was Dante Valencia. One of the reasons why you might not have seen him is because he's very quiet, he's very low key, and he's down on the field level. He's
Ah,
taking
okay.
pictures.
Gotcha,
So
gotcha.
he
Okay.
does sneak up to the press box every now and then, but it's very early. He does take photos, kind of like of the kind of stadium before everything kind of like kicks off. But he's very quiet, very low key guy, and as you saw, he can clearly play a little bit of footy there. He's
Oh yeah,
also
he really
super
can.
young. He's like 23.
Okay, yeah, which that's,
That does it.
yeah, like my daughter is a big Stray Kids fan right now, and the Stray Kids leader apparently is 28. So she's saying I was two of him plus one yesterday
Oh,
Thanksgiving, which was really nice. So,
thanks.
so you have to play soccer really well to be part of the We Are Awesome TV crew. So I guess what that means is I could never be part of the We Are Awesome TV crew.
Hey, you could be the coach. You could be the coach. We
Cool.
need a gaffer.
Emergency podcast. They did a thing, so we gotta talk about it. Emergency podcast. It's an emergency. Emergency podcast. Shut up, oh yeah, shut up, oh yeah, shut up. Emergency podcast. It's an emergency.
A hearty hello to you all, and welcome to Emergency Podcast, the Austin FC podcast, where we talk about all the Austin FC emergencies. It is the day after Thanksgiving. We are recovering from whatever kind of eating we have done on Thanksgiving. Of course, no soccer until the weekend, plenty of the other kind of football, if that is your thing. And as a special guest this week, we have Hernán González from We Are Austin TV. Hernán, how are you doing, and how was your Thanksgiving?
My Thanksgiving, mate, was very, very good. However, I did have to visit three different houses
Wow.
just to make sure everything was kind of good. You know what I'm saying?
Okay.
But we had fun. That means that we ate at three different places. So
Wow.
there's
Okay.
positives. There's positives to everything, right?
Definitely pacing yourself. Was it were they long distances? Like what's the total miles you covered during the day?
No, actually, I was actually kind of lucky. I live on the outskirts of Austin. I live in a small town called Elgin, and
Oh
my
yeah.
family, my parents live in Manor. I'm from Austin, born and raised in
Okay.
Austin, but like many people, when the boom happened in Austin, we had already had land in Manor, so we just bought a house over there. Sorry, we built out there, and I moved to Elgin. So my drive was like 15, 20 minutes from place to place. So thankfully, it was all good. A lot of
Okay. So
food.
you're intimately familiar with 290 is what you're saying.
Yes, yes, but back roads, Phil. Back
Yeah.
roads are
Okay.
your best friend in these
Really?
areas.
Okay.
100%,
All right.
100%.
Okay.
If
And
you
I
know,
guess
you
you're
know.
familiar with Palmer too on the way to the stadium, I'm
Oh
guessing.
yeah, sometimes that's actually the way home after Q2. It's never the way to. I always take
Gotcha.
290, 183. I have
Gotcha.
my little
Gotcha.
hacks here and there, but Palmer is definitely the way back home because there is a gas station on Palmer. I think it's the Speedy Stop. The gas right there is always the cheapest, and I love passing by there.
Awesome.
Life
All
hack
right.
there, life hack.
Yeah, nice. Well, let's get into it. So obviously kind of the big news that we've been waiting for weeks dropped
Yeah.
Tuesday, right? Yeah. So it dropped on Tuesday. So not quite the Wednesday deadline that the club had, but pretty close to it, a lot closer to it in previous years. And again, there was kind of speculation maybe there's one deal that's hung up, but everything that happened I think was maybe kind of pretty straightforward, maybe pretty expected, but I want to go ahead and run through those with you just to check in and see
Mhm.
what your thoughts were and what you think it foretells for the teams. We'll start this alphabetically, which makes the most sense, even though I did something a little bit different in my Verde All Day article. I focused on goalkeeper, which we'll get to in a second. But Julio Cascante, of course, he's an OG with the team. He had, through his time here, 125 appearances out of his 173 league appearances, because, of course, he was in Portland before this. A champion of the goals added metric, the perplexing goals added metric. Obviously, a very offensive-minded center back at times, very good ball progressor, scored some goals here or there, had that immense defensive play to help salvage the U.S. Open Cup semifinal win against Minnesota. But I don't think this was much of a surprise given that he was the only TAM player and had been contributing less and less on the field, especially as a defensive center back. So thoughts here on Julio and his exit?
Now, before I give you my thoughts, I think you said it best at the Media Cup game. You said, "Oh, are you guys going to drop the roster decisions now that we're all here?" And honestly,
on the field,
I thought that maybe they were going to do something like that, but they waited until Tuesday. But on Julio, I think this is one of the roster decisions that maybe a lot of the folks in the fan base, just like you said, kind of like saw coming. Also based off of recent trends that the club has been doing, recent roll moves, more than anything on defense. Everybody that's on defense, especially at the center back position, they earn the same amount of money. They're like kind of like in the same range. And if you saw on the MLSPA, Cascante's salary definitely stuck out. And a lot of folks poked at it, brought it up. And of course, just like you mentioned, his contributions on the field became less and less, and especially with the rise of guys like Doc and also the arrival of Mateja, which the few games that he got this past season, he didn't look that bad. He looked like he was definitely growing as time went on. Yep. But one of my favorite things, at least, that I got to see of Cascante before, the end of the season was kind of one of his last stands, the semifinal in Minnesota, that one flying kick where he got to stop kind of like a one-on-one versus Stuver.
Yeah.
That was probably one of his best moments, at least. Austin FC fans got to see him going out like that. But like you said, it was something that kind of was coming up.
Yeah, because I mean, it's not unusual. You make a good point about the center backs that have been playing a lot of minutes on that same kind of salary range, that kind of 250 to 350 range. That's not unusual when you're building an MLS roster to maybe not be as spendy on your back line and try to spend more on the attacking half of the field. There are some exceptions. Walker Zimmerman's floating around out there as a free agent on kind of probably DP or max TAM level, probably still has some miles left on him, but whether or not that's advisable in building an MLS roster is a kind of a different question entirely. And I think you're beginning to see Rota's philosophy a little bit more in the squad, and having a TAM level center back who's not getting regular minutes is probably not part of that. Stefan Cleveland, I was a little surprised by this because Damian Loss is coming back from loan after getting a gold glove in Louisville for USL. Loss has now mastered the MLS Next Pro and the USL levels, and obviously MLS is the next place for him, but obviously a very good goalkeeper at Austin in the meantime in front of him. So I'm just kind of wondering what this portends. Do you think they're going to keep three goalkeepers on the roster, keep both Cleveland and Loss as backups, or do you think there's plans to move one of those? You can make arguments either way, right? Cleveland did not look as good as you might have wanted him to in that U.S. Open Cup game in 25. I mean, one of the things that kind of stuck out to me is Loss over a whole season playing against USL competition only allowed 0.7 goals a game. Cleveland got one shot at it and let in 2 goals. But at the same time, Cleveland's not so far off from having done a half season with the Sounders, filling in for Stephen Fry and being pretty admirable in that role. So, but you do have him on the kind of older side of 30, whereas Damian Loss, obviously very up and coming goalkeeper, very capable. And I'm just wondering, do they keep all three or do they move one? And which one do you think they move?
So I think this one and maybe one more other topic that we're going to get to, everything else was pretty much straightforward except for kind of these two. And I thought that the club was not going to pick up Stephen Cleveland's option because you knock down 2 birds with 1 stone, because Damian Loss wouldn't, well, we would think that he wouldn't occupy the senior roster spot that Steph would be, right? So Steph would be staying with Austin FC. Loss also comes back. And it's like one of those, not necessarily head scratchers. I do believe that Austin FC might have a plan with one of these 2 keepers, but I think one of them ultimately has to go. I don't think that they're going to have 3 keepers on this roster. Seems like I don't want to say wasted space, but Austin FC needs to occupy every single position that they can to improve this roster. And I don't think having 3 keepers on this team is going to necessarily move you in that direction that you need to be to solidify yourself as a power in this Western Conference.
Because they'll be hurting. Maybe they've got some midfielders and they've got some forwards and wingers, but could probably use more of that than a keeper occupying that slot. But I'm just wondering, do they move Loss, who might seem like he's the more movable of the 2, or do they try to get Cleveland off the books. And again, Cleveland could compete for an MLS starter spot, but at this point, I think Loss can as well.
No, definitely. I think that's going to be a tough choice, Rolo, but ultimately, I think the decision might be made for him, but based on the bidder that comes for either guy.
Yeah.
I think both of them have market in MLS, maybe one higher than the other. But just like you mentioned, Stefan has history in this league where he has played for teams where he's backed up guys, and then he's played here in Austin where he's also had minutes, and then Loss is obviously the more attractive signing, and he also has things under his belt. What he did with Louisville is actually massive. A lot of folks aren't really talking about it that much, although they are giving him love. And I do want to reference a comment on Instagram that the official account of Louisville City FC left. I think it was on, yeah, if it was on Instagram, if I'm not mistaken, but they had dropped that to their knowledge, Damian Loss was staying with Austin for 2026. So we'll see what happens there. But I do think that one of them has to go ultimately.
Yeah, I did see that Instagram also. And the other part of that was Louisville said, oh, yeah, we got something in the works. So Louisville is moving on from Loss. They understand that he's not going to be back under any circumstances. Yeah, that's going to be an interesting one to see. I'm sure Roto is letting other teams in the league know that there is a goalkeeper available. Yeah, that supplemental versus senior spot is huge for roster building, especially because one of the things that I pointed out here is that they have 24 roster spots occupied right now versus last year they had 21 with the exits that they had. So they had a few more exits. And again, some of the players that this was like Ethan Finley, Alex Ring, those types of players who went off the books last year, and they did, to their credit, try to replace them. But again, the jury's still out on some of those. I'm thinking about Sabovic in particular. So let's go ahead. So we'll get to some that were not surprising. So Brendan Heinzike, Danny Pereira, both of them are retained. We figured that they would be picked up. One of the questions with Pereira, there's still, I think, the vague, slim possibility that he might be dealt overseas. I think the window is closing on that, and he is getting more into kind of like the MLS lifer track for his career versus maybe trying things out overseas, be it in Europe, be it in South America. I really feel that maybe his fortunes do lie in MLS, but I'm wondering, is that Austin or is that another team? Do you try to deal him since he is one of the dealable assets? I mean, I would say that Owen Wolf is more dealable, and I would argue that there might be more of a hole left in the team if it was Wolf versus Pereira that went out, just because of what he's done, his flexibility, his chance creation this year, being that type of player. But I don't think either of these surprised you, right? With
No,
Pereira.
no, definitely not. Actually, what kind of surprised me was the fact that the article said that Heinzike option was automatically triggered. I wonder what that was. I think that was the only thing that kind of like stuck out. But I was happy that Heinzike obviously is gonna be here for a couple more years. Danny Pereira is obviously one of the most easiest ones, but just like you mentioned, that window is closing in on him where he has to either make that move or he is going to be that MLS player. A player like him, he has the kind of talent, because if you think back, there was a rumor recently where Danny Pereira there was 4 or 5 MLS teams that were after him. Miami, I think New York City FC, LAFC, Columbus was in that mix.
There was a big LAFC rumor for a while there.
Right. And then also he made it official that Coventry City was after him. So there is interest in a player like Danny Pereira. And then most recently with Venezuela, where he played that long ball, I feel like a lot of people were kind of talking about him on social media. And that's what kind of gets these kind of clubs. They look your way whenever things like this happen. He's a young player. I think he has a boatload of talent, but I do think that he has enough talent to make it out of MLS. He's definitely looking at Europe, maybe South America, a team that plays Libertadores most likely. And I don't think he would compete in a team that isn't Austin FC in MLS. I think he has too much love for Austin.
Okay. That's fair. Obviously, they did pick him first in the super draft, and he has developed. And I think 24 was kind of rough for him. You saw Josh Wolf wearing on players during the tail end of that 24 season. That locker room, there was a really bad energy in there towards parts of that. And, seeing Danny towards the tail end of 24 versus seeing him in 25, I think Nico Estevez has been good for him. I think it's been a good year in terms of his maturity and growth and all that. Definitely. So it's been good to see. Yeah, Heinzike didn't have the best playoff series against LAFC, did have some lapses here and there, but that's, I think, life as an MLS center back. the vast majority are going to have those moments where the spotlight is on them and the negative, but good, solid veteran leader. And I think that he's been pretty solid in the center back role for most of the season. I think that he's maybe best as kind of part of a rotation, maybe getting like 2/3 to 3/4 of the starts, but certainly I think for the number that he's on and the leadership that he brings and the level-headedness that he brings, I think he's good. I think he's a good choice. And then he's had some turns at being captain, and certainly is capable of doing that.
Definitely, definitely. And then there was some criticism towards Heinzike in that LAFC game, saying how Bouanga, kind of made him look in that game. And I was like, guys, Bouanga can do that to anybody in this league. It doesn't matter who you are. And I think Heinzike had a great campaign. I think he was probably the most consistent center back for Austin FC this season. And I think he needs a little bit more credit for what he's done and on the wage that he is on for Austin FC. He's an absolute bargain. And if folks also make memory in some of the interviews that he had, I think it was on the Vamos Verde, where it was confirmed that there was offers from, I think, Qatar or from Saudi for Heinz like that had more money for him, but he chose the project with less money here in Austin FC. And I think that back line has definitely, at least this year, they could hold their hat on the numbers that Austin FC had. I think they finished the regular season as the 5th best defense in the West, if I'm not mistaken. Okay. And Heinzike was a big part of that, huge part of that.
Sure. Yeah, it's good. I think you need players like that to build around, right? You need those kind of glue guys. You need those guys who fill in and contribute in those roles, again, on that level when we talk about the cruelness of the MLS salary cap. So Diego Rubio, that was interesting. So we learned this first. We learned via Instagram that he was exiting. I've heard a little percolating. You guys are kind of the experts in hearing about rumors and things like that. There was speculation about his injury and just kind of heard through the grapevine that the injury maybe wasn't as bad and he's recovering from that. And maybe he felt that he had a little bit more in the tank versus maybe what the club arrived at. I don't know if you've heard anything along those lines.
I haven't heard anything along those lines, but just kind of like looking at him and the way that he presented himself with the minutes that he got this season, I did feel like he had something left in his gas tank. And this was a little bit of a surprise seeing his post. It wasn't a surprise when the club posted theirs out, right? Because Rubio had already confirmed it pretty much. There was also, if you think back, Phil, there was also a knee procedure where they kind of cleaned up the fluid, I think, in his left knee or whatnot. So I think this is just long-term thinking by the club. Rubio for sure feels like he has something left in his gas tank. I've actually heard small conversations here and there about him returning to Chile. We know that he has a big love for them, but I don't know. I feel like he wanted to stay in MLS, especially in Austin for longer. He has roots here. He's doing a lot with the kids here in this area. So he definitely probably himself thought that he had something left in the gas tank, but the club, just like you mentioned, is maybe thinking about this long term and wishing him good luck.
Yeah, but keeping him on a supplemental in 26, I don't think would have been the worst idea, considering Brandon Vázquez is not going to be ready to go at the start of the season. You're maybe heaping a little bit more responsibility on CJ Fodry, but maybe you think he's ready at that point. There's a big question about Uzuni. Do you retain him? Do you think that he's going to bounce back? Do you think that his psyche can be repaired after the rough time that he had between the U.S. Open Cup and the playoffs in terms of his penalty kicks? So having a player like Rubio in there might have been useful. You probably still need to get one more player who can do that kind of second striker creator work that Rubio was able to do. And Rubio obviously on the tail end of his career, but at the same time, not far removed from having all-star caliber seasons with the Rapids. So yeah, that one was a bit puzzling to me that they didn't arrive at that, especially given that supplemental status, which gives you a lot more flexibility. But sadly he's gone. It was good to have him on the team, but I guess there's some business rationale. If we do get a chance to talk to Roto at some point, I'm going to be curious about that move in particular. And then Ilie Sanchez. A lot of people speculated that he might be out, especially MLSPA had reported he was on 600,000 last year, which again, it was a big drop off from where Ilie was when he was with LAFC, but seeing kind of his minutes decrease and seeing just him maybe losing a step from where he was a couple of years ago, the on the field Ilie that we saw in 25 is maybe not necessarily the one that we saw in 24 or 23. Still immense in terms of his leadership, in terms of his countenance. Talking to him is an absolute joy from the media perspective. expensive, but he does resign on a lesser number. We won't know when until MLSPA Christmas, which will happen sometime in April. But just kind of curious about that move. Is that him maybe transitioning into coaching? Do we still think that he's got things left in the tank? Do we think we're going to see him on the field a lot in 2026 again, especially given the midfield depth that Austin retained?
Now, what I thought leading into this was that Ilya Sanchez, I wanted him to stick around for 2026, but there was conditions on this, right? I wanted him to sign a new contract, and I wanted it to be on a lower number. He was in the, I believe it was top six of the highest paid players at the club. And of course, folks were definitely going to point that out, especially in a league where the cap means so much. And his contributions, I believe, were significant in 2025. He was a leader, assist in the US Open Cup final. But in 2026, he definitely has to take on a bit of, I think maybe either the same or less minutes. I don't want him to have a more significant role with Austin FC. And it is going to be a little bit of a transition into kind of like that player coach role. I think that Hector Jimenez played it well back in previous years for Austin FC. And there are a lot of young guys in this midfield that could benefit from the leadership of Ilya Sanchez and the experience that he has in MLS. Nico, Danny Pereira, Owen Wolf, however long those guys have left here, and also especially Irvin Torres. So there is a lot of depth in this midfield, just like you said. And Ilya Sanchez, I think how I'm looking at this new contract really depends on that number that comes out in the spring. Because if it's on the same or like generally in the same amount of money, I'm going to be a little bit disappointed. I'm hoping it is significantly lower, but we'll see where this goes.
It depends on what else they can do with the roster, right? If they can get players on lower numbers that produce, then it doesn't matter if you're maybe paying a few veteran players a little bit more than maybe they're contributing. Again, that's something that you got to factor in. It's weird to talk about what other people make. But
exactly.
Again, it is, like we said, it is the reality of MLS and being a salary cap league and making sure that your production is commensurate with the numbers that you're paying players and trying to find those quote unquote bargains. Someone like an Owen Wolf where you're not paying them very much in terms of salary and yet they're producing at levels that are much higher, right? Again, part of the concerns with Austin FC, of course, is the designated players and what they're doing commensurate to what they're being paid. Had some articles about that recently that talked about that a little bit more. Yeah, do you have any ballpark guesses on what Ilya's number is at? I'm thinking maybe like in the 300 to 400,000 range, because again, he was on like I think $1.1 million, $1.2 million just last season, not 2025 but 2024.
Yeah.
So those are kind of precipitous declines. So given where he was, but also he's not getting the minutes that he once was either. And I think against certain teams, his defensive organization comes into play. Against a team like LAFC that can kill you on the counter, you just need as much speed as possible. And there are faster midfielders at this point on the roster than Ilya.
Now, he was on 600,000 guaranteed for Austin FC in 2025. So massive drop off, just like you mentioned. Now, I would probably think it'll be about 400, but I'll be very surprised if Ilya is maybe going to occupy. I mean, one guy goes out and maybe one guy goes into the new veteran spot that occupies that supplemental roster spot. I don't know if Ilya can maybe go down to that or whatnot. It'll be a huge shock, huge surprise if Austin FC can pull that off. But I wouldn't be surprised if it's at the 400,000s. I'd be super, super surprised if it's at the supplemental area.
Yeah, supplemental, again, you have to be in, like, I think the max you can do with some buy downs and things like that is around like 180 or 200,000. And that just seems insulting for a player of Ilya's capability.
Tough.
Yeah.
It'll be tough.
Yeah, Diego did it, but I think Diego, part of that was just kind of like a willingness to really want to stay here, having 4 kids, really liking Austin, seemed to really kind of relish the role in the community that he was having and all that. And if you made enough money in your career and you're comfortable, maybe you take that. But yeah, it does. Supplemental does also have like a certain weird air about it as well, right? So it's just the nature of the term. It's not very complimentary. It's a little weird. We have to think in this way, but it is weird to talk about salaries for people that are genuinely kind and nice people.
It's just the reality of MLS, and until they either increase this salary cap or until they get rid of some of these rules, this is just the kind of the conversations that some folks are kind of gonna have to go through, because these are kind of loopholes. You got to get through all these things where you need the right people in the places of front office to also make the right decisions in these kind of moments. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, you can on one hand say that there is this competitive balance that happens as a result of the salary caps, and that's the idea. And I would hate for it to be a free for all like the Premier League, because again, the Premier League is essentially you have these haves and these have nots, and it's predetermined who's going to be in competition for the title at the start of the season versus MLS, where it is a little bit more up in the air. But when you look at LAFC and Miami and what they've been able to do, of course, there's no guarantee that spending a lot and having a lot of resources will result in a good team. Looking at you, Atlanta United and Toronto FC, but LAFC and Miami, you've seen what they're able to do and the level of player that they've been able to command, and just how they're able to be at this competitive advantage as a result of what they've done. Just heard some rumor this morning that Kai Wagner might be going to Inter Miami to replace Jordi Alba if he is indeed out. That's interesting and troubling for the rest of the league. I mean, kind of a rich getting richer kind of situation there, maybe.
The rich always get richer in this world, Phil. That's exactly how it works. And maybe, hey, we might see him because Austin FC does have to open up their brand new stadium April
Mm-hmm.
4th. So hey,
Yeah.
count on it. Count on it. We might be there. We might see him.
Yeah, I heard you guys talking about you're gonna send a crew down there.
It would be something to maybe not once in a lifetime kind of thing,
Mm-hmm.
but kind of once in a lifetime kind of spectacle, especially in
Yeah.
Miami doing it big. You just
Mm-hmm.
know that there's going to be all the just the new streamers or the new
Mm-hmm.
like famous
Yeah.
people, but there's going to be a lot of like soccer world famous folks or whatnot. So we'll see.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see just where
Yeah, I'm
where
contemplating
everybody's
it.
at.
I have not been on many away trips since the striker folded, but whereas I was kind of a road warrior at points there and I was going to various Western Conference outposts. But yeah, that one's intriguing. And again, just
Yeah.
obviously Miami is a city, pretty vibrant, pretty exciting, but also, yeah, just to be a part of that history. I don't necessarily need to rub elbows with, soccer royalty, although that'll make for some fun stories, right? But just to be able to kind of see the spectacle of this new stadium opening,
Yeah.
and supposed to be very state of the art and very exciting. I know that you guys were talking about state of the art stadiums as well. You were glossing Real Madrid's new stadium, which kind of makes me cringy a little bit just because my Atletico leanings. I understand that they have fans, so
I mean, it is nice, honestly, like
yeah,
engineering. We got to at
sure.
least give them that. The
Oh yeah, of
architecture of
course.
what they've done with that field is crazy. And I think it was
Mhm.
really kind of like on showcase, especially with the NFL game that was
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
And actually, shout out to Taylor Swift for putting also Real Madrid on the kind of like Hollywood map. She's been dropping their name every like here and there in like some like
Really?
songs or whatnot. Yeah.
Oh wow. Okay.
So
Okay.
yeah, it's Swifty. Swifty's doing some work there too. So getting some love there. But that stadium, I haven't personally been there. I would love to go check it out, but I'm labeling it as a wonder of the world. And hopefully one day I can check it out.
I
It'd
guess
be nice.
Atletico needs to recruit a female pop star then to counter that.
I heard that the city is Madrid, but the stadium,
Okay.
I heard that is very nice.
Okay, nice. So, all right. Yeah, let's speculate a little bit about the offseason. Pretend that you are Rodolfo Borrell and you have, again, there there are limited resources. That has been a thing that has hampered Austin FC throughout its existence, right? So again, you see LAFC, they're able to flip players for millions of GAM and then get players back in return on millions of GAM, and they have gotten into the cycle where they've been able to do this based on some of the moves that they've made early on. Austin FC is kind of at this point 5 years in where they're not developing a ton of academy players, right? You have Irvin Torres as a homegrown, you have Micah Burton as a homegrown, but again, I mean, of the two, I think Torres is going to be the more promising player, but trying to see what level they're going to top out at is remains to be seen type of thing. But Austin FC has not been able to maybe land that kind of quote unquote star player as of yet, right? Vázquez comes pretty close in terms of recognizability, but you look at the summer, you look at LAFC getting Sun, you look at Vancouver getting Muller, although they did flip Pedro Vite for that, which was instrumental in them doing that, I believe. And then Austin's big move is Mateja Djordjevic, which I think is going to be a promising young player, but obviously not the level of name recognition or talent,
Yep.
shall we say. So just curious, in the offseason, like there's the Owen Wolf question and there's the Myrto Uzuni question, and then there's just the what does this team need to get to the next level? Because I think if you have them at the same level, if you get like for like players, I think you're looking at a similar kind of sixth place finish in the West, given that the competition where it is, given what those top teams in the West and East have been able to do, the kind of level of players that they're at. You need, I think, at least one more difference maker on Austin to make them competitive at that elite level.
Honestly, I think it's probably a no-brainer who Austin FC needs to be targeting 100%
Okay.
and they can land. And it's nobody else, none other than Cristian Espinoza at San Jose.
Okay.
Absolute just drop the ball moment from their FO. They absolutely, I think they forgot some kind of deadline.
Right. Yeah.
Cristian Espinoza was like, okay, they forgot about it. Cool, sounds good. I'm gonna see what I can do. Cristian Espinoza, I think if you land a player like him, especially after what he's done in this league with, if we're being quite honest, with a poor team like San Jose, who has made some investment in the past. We saw the team that they built under Bruce, but they still weren't able to have that kind of fist on the table kind of season. And Cristian Espinoza being free the way that he is right now, I think Austin FC needs to be going all out to get somebody like him. He would be able to get the balls to BV9 that some of us have been asking for they've been asking for a creative 10 or somebody. He plays on the wing sometimes too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But a player like Cristian Espinoza that has that creative spark to light up guys like Brandon Vázquez, ultimately Uzuni, and maybe even Bukhari. It also opens up the question is, well, he's a DP. What are you going to do there? Does that mean somebody has to go? What does Austin FC have to do there? The Bugatti question kind of opens up about if you can even buy him down. With Julio being out the door, you have all this TAM open up, speculating. But that's somebody that I would like to see come in. Now we're talking about departures. Go ahead.
I got a couple of questions then. First of all, so yeah, he does primarily play as a right winger, also plays as a left winger, right? I guess you could slot him in technically as a 10 and have him be more of a string puller, but who then out of, again, assuming that Uzuni, Vázquez, Bukhari are all healthy, who do you take out of the starting lineup? Or do you try to put all four of them on the field and see what you can do there?
The goal would be to try to get all four of them on the field.
But you have four DPs essentially. I don't know that you can get Espinoza on a max TAM. I don't know that he would do that necessarily, or I don't think you can buy Bukhari down with the mass TAM given his
that's the big question. That's the big question.
Salary wise, you could transfer fee. When you figure that in, I don't think you can.
Now, Buka, he would definitely have to be the one, but I think based off of whenever he got to Austin FC, I think people already had done the math. You're not going to be able to do that or whatnot. I don't know exactly if Rodo and his team can actually pull that off or whatnot, but if one of them has to go, you look at the transfer rumors that recently hit social media, transfer market even posted on it. Uzuni and the rumors to Italy, the new agency that he did sign for after the Open Cup final loss. It was actually quite of an interesting detail. The Open Cup final happened, and then he signed to a new agency maybe like a week and a half later. So that's a big detail there. Okay. Now there has been speculation that the rumor is false, right, or whatnot. But another thing to also point out is that the agency that he did sign for already has two players on that Italian side. So it just adds like fire to the flame or whatnot. But if there was one player that had to go, I think everybody would maybe look at Myrto Uzuni. I think a lot of fans' reaction maybe wouldn't be that harsh if he is one of the players that ultimately does leave. Maybe it would be best for kind of both parties. But I'm also on the side that I would like to see some kind of like revenge tour. I would like to see him have that second season that everybody always says that he needs to revive himself at any kind of given club. Granada, he had a phenomenal second season, and that's what everybody's banking off of. But if there's a candidate to leave the club, it's not going to be Brandon Vázquez. I don't think it's Osman Bukhari. I think the one is Myrto Uzuni because he also has potential to maybe sign to some other club out there. I think Buka does have that potential as well, but Myrto Uzuni is probably somebody that is maybe more attractive to some clubs, especially with his international fame as well.
Yeah, I could see with Uzuni, I mean, his agent just kind of chalking it up to MLS is weird. It was a weird year, new kid, family was away from him for parts of the season. Yeah, I mean, I think if you can kind of cut losses there and move him. I mean, again, yeah, like the revenge tour thing is also appealing as well, right? If he has a big bounce back sophomore season, converts some PKs, proves everybody wrong. But otherwise, yeah, if you change Espinoza for him in a way, it's kind of like for like. I mean, you've got a 30-year-old for a 30-year-old. You've got somebody who can play left wing, although it's not his preferred position, for someone who can play left wing, but it's not his preferred position. But the difference, of course, is that Espinoza has shown over the course of several years that he can do it in MLS. Myrto has been spotty flexibility in terms of that, shall we say. So that's interesting. I mean, I still think that having a creative central midfielder is something that Austin desperately needs. I just don't know that they've got the roster flexibility again to do that. And they've got three DPs. One is, in Bukari is someone who can create, who can play one-on-one really well, but hasn't entirely done that successfully, consistently at least, right? So, and then with Vázquez, you have someone who can score goals, who looks like he was coming on, but seems to be like very reliant on a creative number 10 in order to do his best work. And then, of course, we don't know what he's going to be like coming off the knee injury. And then Uzuni, who I think is it's a mess right now. Just hearing Nico talk about his PK in the playoffs and how that wasn't like him and how mystified he was by how badly he took that is maybe emblematic of the kind of struggles that Uzuni is having to adjust to MLS. And this is somebody clearly who wants it. This is somebody who is all about football. Quotes from him throughout the year. This guy's determined. This guy's locked in. This is not him slacking off or anything like that. I almost think that it's a case of somebody who is trying too hard and is pushing and is in his own head. And I don't know how he gets out of that. And Nico seems like the right kind of coach that would get him right, but I just don't know if the pressures and the weirdness of all of it is maybe too much, and maybe just a change of scenery is best for him at this point.
One of the things that I wanted to mention real quick is one of the best things going into 2026 is that Brandon Vázquez is going to have double the motivation to get back to the level that he was at. Number one, he wants to, kind of get back for the Austin FC fans. And number two, if I'm not mistaken, it was in the US Open Cup kind of pre-match coverage where he mentioned that he wants to get back in that question for the US men's national team World Cup squad. And I think there is a small window if he does become ready, if he does have playing time, and if he's scoring goals, I think there's a small chance that he does come back into the question for Poch. I don't know if that's timely for him. I don't know if that chance is there, but hey, he has that motivation to come back to make that roster. Now with Myrto, Coach Nico had already recovered him this season. We saw whenever Myrto deactivated socials, we were thinking, well, what's going on with him? Is he good? Where's he at mentally? Coach Nico comes out, defends him, said that he would give his life for him, said that he had a long talk with him. He recovered him already from that moment. I think he's just maybe too much in his head 100%. He sees everything on social media, and fans, they have not been nice, especially in comments on Austin FC posts. 2 penalties, 2 huge moments. How can the fans kind of not be at least negative in some shape or form? We're not going to tell people how to support this team, right? But I think he just sees too much online. I think whenever he wasn't on socials, it benefited him, whatnot. But right now he's with his family. He's recharging. He's out there enjoying his time, visiting his old school where he went at whenever he was a kid. So hopefully his batteries come back charged up with vengeance, with the chip on his shoulder for 2026, because he has so much to prove. The things he said when he got to Austin FC, Phil, were insane. That he was coming here to break records. He was coming here to leave his mark in the club. I mean, a lot to live up for Myrto, and it's a hole that he dug himself into, Phil. It's a hole that he put himself in, and we'll see just what kind of Myrto Uzuni we get in 2026. But better yet, we'll see if we have a Myrto Uzuni in 2026.
Right. Yeah. I was going to say, we'll see whether he is a Myrto Uzuni in an Austin FC jersey or in a Spanish team jersey or an Italian team jersey. By the way, we've been mentioning Nico a little bit. I know that you did this on your show, but just thoughts out to Nico and his family. His mom passed recently. Nico was talking about that to a group of us after that last playoff game, after all the interviews were happening. And he continues to be just a really solid, nice, approachable guy. And definitely, as we revealed in the survey that we did recently, that most people are on board with the job that Nico's doing so far. I know that everybody wants more. I know that this fan base is frustrated. I know that 6th in the West isn't necessarily satisfying, but given where the team's been in 23 and 24, he certainly made a big difference, and you can see the culture shift. And I think a lot of that just emanates from him being a nice guy and just knowing that he's dealing with that and has been dealing with that all season. Yeah, just heartfelt wishes out to him, that her memory's a blessing and that he recovers, and that his family was able to have some sort of resolution in that, because that's a tough thing to deal with.
100%, man. And I was just, whenever the news had hit, was just thinking about him dealing with the season's workload and having
Mhm.
that in the back of his mind, and him being across a whole body of water. You know what I'm saying? Like, I
Mhm.
have the luxury where I can drive 15, 20 minutes and I can see my mom and I can hug her and
Right.
whatnot. You have to take a whole flight, and then you
Mhm.
have to take charge of this organization. You have to be the manager of this entire huge thing that's Austin FC, where you deal with so many moving parts and a very just passionate fan base, just like you said, a very
Mhm.
demanding fan base. And it's just tough. It was a very tough year for everybody. And just like you mentioned, I hope Coach Nico and his family find strength and try to getting through this moment. And it's very, very tough, but at least he knows that he has a huge community out here in Austin that backs him 100%. And he's definitely not going to go through this by himself. The Verde
Mhm.
community is going to be there with him 100%.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Just thinking about these players and these coaches and all that, that sometimes I think a lot of fans forget that they are human beings, that they're not
100%.
just there to perform and put up stats and get wins by any means necessary. These are like unusually driven people, obviously. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
if at this level you have to be able to succeed just to get at this, but also human beings with emotions. And we see it. I mean, like we in the media, we're lucky, but we're also burdened to a certain degree to see more than most just what these players are going through and having
Mm-hmm.
to we have these relationships with them. And then in these kind of tougher moments, like, yeah, like the US Open Cup final loss, like the playoff exit to LAFC, like having to actually go in there and ask these questions. It's not an easy thing to do at all. But it's also, I think it's necessary. And I feel blessed to have that role and to have carved that out. And I'm sure you do as well. But sometimes it's not easy because you develop these relationships where you try to be objective, but you also do want to see the success. The success is a lot of fun. I mean, just seeing, I don't know if you were in on the Nico press conference after the win against Minnesota to get to the finals. He was joyous. He was a bully. And I have never seen, I think, a coach so happy to get into a final as he did in that moment. And it was great. They had an incredible run and he deserved all that joy, and he was trying to get the media to share in the joy, and it was a fun, good moment. And I was in a hotel room in El Paso experiencing it,
I wasn't
in the midst of a work conference.
I wasn't on the video call. Well, I wasn't in the press call because I was in the mix zone. But
Oh yeah, yeah, okay.
one thing that surprised me was that when all the players went out, he had to come out of the locker room last. So maybe he was having a moment there. But
Mhm.
Coach Nico came out of the locker room last, and he stopped to get on the mic. And I was like, "You sure, Coach? Like you already talked to the media. Like you already did your job." Sometimes players, CJ had done his work with the media and he just walked by, and I was like, okay, cool. Cause you already talked to the media. I don't
Right.
expect you to
Yeah.
get on the mic. You're tired. You just ran 120, well,
Yeah, yeah. Right, right.
not his case, but you know what I mean?
Mhm.
And coach stopped and he got on the mic and he said some words, and he had the biggest smile on his
Yeah.
face. He was so happy or whatnot, but it just surprised me that the gaffer had stopped and gotten on the mic, and I was like, man, this guy just wants to talk. He just wants to get on any kind of mic right now and
Yeah, for sure.
just talk to anybody right now. So
Yeah.
big ups to
Yeah,
him.
because he had been in there with us quite a while, I guess, by the time he got to y'all.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
and they had gotten like this box of pizza, and he had his box of pizza with him. He just looked like the happiest kid. Like, awesome guy.
All right. Anything else? Any other thoughts about the offseason and kind of moves that need to be made? I would love a central attacking midfielder, chance creator type. We've never really had a number 10
Mm-hmm.
in the club's history. I don't know that that's doable without giving up a DP spot. I know that some people have speculated maybe we get a Max Tam. I know that there were Curvin Andrade rumors for a while to try to get a U22. That didn't materialize, but I was very temporarily excited last year, even though he would have been very green. He looked like a very kind of promising, fun player, and obviously Venezuelan international would have
Mm-hmm.
been instant sync up with Pereira.
Yeah.
So just thoughts on that. I mean, do you think that something like that is possible and in the works, or is that not necessarily the way that Roto is building this team?
As of right now, the only rumor that has surfaced around is coming from the Seattle journalist Nico Moreno, the
Mhm.
John Bell. But
Oh
I
yeah,
mean, Rolo has a pretty tight ship. There's not a lot of rumors that kind of get out. If anything, it's always
right.
from the country where this player is coming from. There's always
Yeah.
something that hits social media and whatnot. But from Austin, there's very few things that are being tossed around about who they're going after. But this fan base and this media is also very smart. I think we've been following this team very closely for a long time. A lot of us know what this team needs. I mean, cam kind of player, somebody in the attack that can connect the links up top that Robert Taylor wasn't for this team. Somebody in that kind of position, in that kind of role would be just fantastic for this Austin FC side. But there are some very interesting names out there. I think Rodo Borrell is definitely working around the clock with his team to bring these kind of guys to the club. And I'm happy that they're retaining Owen Wolf for a little bit more, Danny Pereira a little bit more. You're going to get a little bit more juice out of them for your Austin FC smoothie. But you just know that some of these guys are just going to be out the door sooner or later. And the World Cup coming up, there's going to be a lot of interest. There's a lot of people there's a lot of people feel that are talking about Owen Wolf and Danny Pereira on social media now. I think that's something that hasn't been the case before. Owen Wolf is finally getting those shouts from the U.S. national team fan base, which is a tough one to crack. They are a tough one to crack, the social media U.S. fan base, but they're finally calling for Owen Wolf. And I think he's having consistent performances where he needs to be maybe on a higher level. And American players in Europe, they're very attractive for their price that's very cheap, and also for their kind of high ceiling that they can get out of them. So we'll see what happens with those two. I'm very excited for some departures because that'll bring you GAM, and then you can mess with that or whatnot. Austin FC's biggest sale was Juicy, and they immediately invested that back in. So I'm excited to see Austin FC have a big sale and have money to mess around with. So will it be Danny or will it be Owen first?
Owen is the more marketable of the two just because he's younger and he seems to maybe have a higher ceiling at this point. But do you pull the trigger on that? Do you make that move? Do you get Owen for a boatload of GAM and try to get like a true heliocentric number 10 in the role to try to connect that? Or do you hold on to him and see what else he can give you as he develops into his early 20s? Because again, yeah, he doesn't turn 21 until the end of the year. And given what we've seen of Sebastian Berhalter over the last few years, I could kind of see a similar trajectory for him, but whether he does it here or overseas, that's the big question right now. The kind of moves that LAFC has been able to make were predicated on those kind of initial offloading players for GAM. And Owen could springboard you into that if you moved him, but also you're moving arguably your best player, somebody who fans in the survey that we did voted the MVP for last year. And I think well-deservedly so.
I mean, I would have a conversation with the player because it is a World Cup year. You're not in Poch's list, but that doesn't mean that you're not going to be in Poch's list in some months. You don't know who's going to make it to that point. You don't know who's going to still be there or whatnot. And Owen is definitely getting some shouts. Poch was here to look at him or whatnot, but I would have a small chat with the player. And if there is a team that is fulfilling the needs of what the club asked for a player like Owen Wolf, and if it benefits him, and if he wants to take that risk to go to a whole new team, to a whole new system, whole new club in a moment where you have to be getting consistent minutes, that's also something for them to pick up on. But if they want to stay for this season, just like you said, Owen Wolf is by far the best player that Austin FC had this year. I mean, he was phenomenal, lights out, fantastic. I mean, where would the team be without him and a guy like Stuver? So I think that'd be a decision. Probably. Out of the playoffs for sure, for sure. But that's a decision that both parties need to make. I think Austin is definitely a club that's in the business to sell players, and they know that they have a huge asset in Owen Wolf, and maybe they want to keep developing him to see just what he kind of turns into, get more at him or whatnot. But Rodo Borrell, with the connections he has, I'm sure he's probably looking around for a good spot for Owen. They're not going to send him to anywhere. They're going to find somewhere good for him or whatnot. And yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up at not a top team, Phil, but something respectable. I think so.
As long as it's someplace where he doesn't disappear. Like you've kind of seen the Matt Turner saga where he's come back to the Revs after kind of floundering around Europe. He went to Arsenal and you think, oh, that's great. That's wonderful for his development. It didn't turn out to be. And it's not necessarily great for these players to suddenly find themselves in Europe, not getting minutes and not getting respect and having new coaches come in. And just, the ground can shift pretty rapidly when that's happening. Whereas with Austin, obviously, you had Owen's dad as coach leaving, and that in a way I think turned out to be maybe the best thing for him because he finally got this new voice and he got to develop in a way that shows that, okay, it's not just nepotism at work as some fans had alleged. I think a lot of us saw his potential, but certainly what he did in 2025 is an extension of what he's been building towards. And he was being roundly criticized. He was still a teenager, right? So you've got to let these players develop. And they're playing against grown-ass 25-year-old men, right? So when you're 18, 19 and you're doing that, there's going to be, unless you're lights out phenomenal, like elite, you're obviously going to have this developmental curve that you're going to have to hit to get to that level. But we definitely see Owen is doing that in what he's done this year.
100%. Owen, Danny Pereira is also one of those younger guys that just built himself up. And CJ Fodry, he's on that trajectory. I'm not saying he's there yet, but he's on his way to kind of solidify himself as a force to be reckoned with in this league. And I think a lot of folks for a long time have been speculating or kind of just been manifesting CJ Fodry transferred to San Diego FC for some reason, but I feel like it's somewhere in the books down the line for CJ Fodry, but we'll see. That's just like speculating years down the line, but those guys, they're Austin FC players right now, and they've been doing things well for the club. Now, one other thing is the John Bell situation, because with Cascante out the door, right, you get this John Bell movement that is coming out from Seattle. Now, remember how I mentioned that there's going to be transfer rumors coming out, but it's always information coming from where this player is at. In this case, Seattle, Nico, he's the one putting it out. John Bell supposedly in talks. I don't think they can necessarily be in talks, but maybe there is some kind of contact, unofficial or whatnot. I don't know how exactly he got this information, but with Julio Cascante out the door and John Bell saying that he plays primarily center back, sometimes left back, and he's on an extremely low wage, 135,000 based on the 2025 MLSPA. I feel like this is a signing that Rodo has his claws all over. It fits the bill. I don't know what you think about it.
It seems like a good fit. Yeah, big left-footed center back, can distribute. I hear his decision-making is maybe not the best, that's something that's maybe kind of been holding him back a little bit. But again, especially if you are playing in a back five kind of situation and you have two other center backs covering, maybe he flourishes and develops and grows in that situation. But I believe he is still young enough where there is development that's possible. I think it's a good move. I think it's a good kind of smart money Roto signing like we've seen if it does manifest. Of course, the other player they let go is Paul Rothrock, which is intriguing, but I do think that he's going to command quite a bit of money. Again, this strikes me similar to when Danny Musovski was out there and Austin had a chance at him, and then he ended up actually being with Seattle. And you look at his per 90 numbers, and they're pretty outrageous. I mean, he didn't necessarily shine game in, game out for them, but he was a contributor. And I see Rothrock as maybe being even a better version of that. But I don't know necessarily that Austin becomes his landing place just because there's a lot of teams to choose from. And theoretically, the front three is not necessarily what Austin FC needs any more than depth in. But if Uzuni is offloaded, then that changes things considerably. And I don't know if necessarily Rothrock is the kind of substitute that you want in there for that, even though it would probably be on considerably less money, and that allows you to employ a DP somewhere else, but could make a lot of sense. And again, if you have people coming out of that Seattle culture, you know that it's a winning culture, you know that they've learned a lot about how to play soccer during that time, and that can certainly benefit any team.
I don't know if this is a hot take, but I really like Paul Rothrock. I hate like Paul Rothrock because when he played versus Austin, it made me hate him. But then I thought about it, I was like, I hate him because this guy's just good. He's good at what he does. And I paid attention to him the rest of the year, and I kind of noticed whenever he did certain things or whatnot, he was good. He's a great player. I think it would benefit Austin to get somebody like him. But my hot take is that Paul Rothrock is just John Gallagher if you consistently let him play in the offense. They even look alike. They got the same hair. It's just like Mario, Luigi. They're the same guy, just like kind of like different or whatnot. But I really like Paul Rothrock. I don't know it. Just like you mentioned,
I think he's going to find his way back to Seattle, though. I have a feeling like they're going to work something out. You heard about when I believe it was when Seattle was playing Miami, and they had a fan thing out, and Sounded Hard actually like kind of originated this. But you were able to trade in your Messi jersey for a Paul Rothrock jersey for free.
Insane marketing.
So good.
Insane marketing.
So
wow. Wow. And I think Charlotte,
people took him up on it. Like
Charlotte backed it up, and they did something too. If I'm not mistaken. But insane marketing, fantastic Paul Rothrock. What a freaking moment from the Seattle FO. I loved it. I wish I was there, so I would have done it too.
Yeah. Anything else you got? Any other thoughts heading into the offseason? Anything that you're looking for in particular with your crew as you continue to do all the good work and post embarrassing pictures of your Truly from the Media Cup game? There's one where I look like I'm about to die on the field. So, really appreciate that.
A lot of us were about to die on that field, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know if it was me, but did you notice that the pitch was a little bit harder this season? It wasn't as
Yeah.
It wasn't as fluffy. I remember last year was fluffier.
Yeah, and we didn't get to wear cleats. We got to wear flats,
True,
hence the
true.
sliding around and the extra drama that created.
Yes.
And as you also saw from that photo montage, I lost half of my sole on my right shoe on my Samba. They were really old Sambas, and yeah, just deteriorated throughout the course of like the 35, 40 minutes that I ended
Sports
up
history,
playing.
sports history, media cup history right there. Sports lore. That is what I call it. But other than kind of what we talked about already, I'm gonna be looking out for kind of signings in the attack more than anything. I know that the John Bell one makes sense. I don't know if he
Mhm,
would be a starter. I'd like to see maybe Mateja fill in
mhm,
Cascante's void and then somebody else fill in that kind of rotational
mhm.
center back. And I think John Bell's wage kind of fits in perfectly with that.
Sure. Yeah.
135 is nothing. Rolo
Yeah.
probably loves it. But other than that, I'm gonna be really looking at the attack signings or the attacking rumors for Austin FC because it's clear that at the beginning of 2025, just like they mentioned that they were going to focus on the defensive side of things, they did. Like I mentioned, the fifth best defense in the West at the end of the regular season. So they already took care of that. It's clear to me the issue is going forward in the attack. They need to create more chances. They need to have higher XG in games. They need to get the
Mhm.
ball to Brandon Vázquez when he comes back, and they need to recover Myrto Uzuni if he's going to be here for 2026. That's the job for Nico. It's the job for Rodo and for the offensive player that obviously comes in. Will it be Espinoza? Will it be Rothrock? We'll see when these things come to social media, whenever the news hits. But until then, it's gonna be a long off season because of all the things that need to be done, and I don't know if they're gonna do them.
Yeah, and you'd mentioned buyouts too, and I'm wondering if they're going to exercise those, what they're going to exercise, what they're going to find out. There's the Robert Taylor question. There's the Hodder Obrian question. You've
Yep.
got to look at players, especially on higher numbers, and again, what they're producing given what they're being paid, and are there better options out there? I know Taylor was a bit of a dice roll, nice guy when we met him and all that, but it just never really seemed to click for him on the field, and
Yep.
he had kind of more bad moments than good moments in Verde
Yep.
last year. So concerned about that. But again, yeah, we'll see where things go. Yeah, and we'll both of course be all over it as as things develop. So looking forward to continuing seeing your coverage in the off season. Thanks so much for being on. And again, just so glad that you and your crew are doing everything that you're doing out there.
Thank you for the invite, Phil. Appreciate you, mate. And
Absolutely.
can't wait to see you in Miami so we can go live outside their Miami Freedom Park.
Yeah, I'll see if I can make that happen.
This is the best thing I've heard in the history of the 8 years I've been on this planet.